This week's topic is one that I think is pretty essential for us because most people are lonely. I think a lot of people live lonely lives, and we're surrounded by people. Although with all the current events, some people are still pretty isolated. But even when you are amongst a ton of people within a few feet, even, and you're talking with people, you're interacting with people, doesn't really mean you're having a relationship with those people. It doesn't mean that you actually are connected to them in a meaningful way, in a way that makes a difference, that a way that brings joy, a way that brings peace, a way that really is what we were designed for, what we were made for, is to have love, to have relationship with each other and essentially with the Lord. That's what the discussion is going to be about. That's what the questions and the verses and all that. I hope that it's helpful, because this is one of those that oftentimes, even in a home and in families, people don't recognize and don't even realize how isolated they are, because they hang out together. They discuss the day's events. They discuss weather. They discuss politics. They discuss all kinds of things, and they even think they discuss what's going on in the heart. But more often than not, so many families, friends, people in church, coworkers, everyone we have a relationship with, oftentimes we don't really have any kind of true relationship with, because we're trying to be what they want us to be, or at least what we think they want us to be. We're trying to be what we want people to perceive of us. We're trying to be something that oftentimes we're just not. And then we also want others to be what we hope they'll be. We try to interpret them through our own desires. We try to control them so that they respond, act, and think the way that we want them to. And so all of us are trying to control our lives, control our narrative, control our script of what my life needs to be like, what people need to see in me, and what others need to be around me. That's not a relationship. That is basically trying to be a demigod, trying to be a controller that doesn't seek the good of others, doesn't seek what is best for others, but rather just seeks its own, seeks only what is good for oneself. And when we live trying to fulfill what's good for me, myself, and I, that's about the only relationship you have. And actually, you start to lose that relationship because you become double-minded, you become double-souled, to where you don't even know yourself. You can't even understand yourself. And that's kind of how we're born. We're born sinful. We were created and designed to have relationships, and yet through sin and through our own decisions of sin, we've isolated ourselves to where we don't even know. Jeremiah 17 says, who can understand the heart? The heart is deceitful. Only the Lord knows. And so when it comes to having relationships, it's very hard, because when you are selfish, when you are proud, when you are about you, you're not going to actually have genuine relationships. Oh, you're going to relate to people. You're going to have interactions. You're going to have ongoing discussions and things like that. But to actually connect, to actually have a love, a genuine concern, a rejoicing in who the person around you is and who you are, and be able to have peace with God, and to understand Him even through others, and to understand what He's doing in your life and how He's changing your heart. It's all around relationship. It's all about knowing God. That's what he talks about in 2 Peter, that it's through the knowledge of Him, a relationship with Him, that we actually participate in the divine nature. We have a relationship with Him. That's how we actually relate to Him. We have all His precious promises. We have everything we need for life and godliness through our relationship with Him. And so we need to make that effort. And the effort we make is to add to our faith knowledge, goodness, and it goes down to that brotherly love, or brotherly kindness, and then to love. And so you find faith working itself out in love, as he says in Galatians 5:6. And that's all through a relationship with Jesus. That's all through a true, genuine relationship with the Lord that we now have a relationship with him and with each other. That's what 1 John 1 is all about, is how do we have fellowship with one another? It's by walking in the light. It's literally being real. It's not about being perfect for us, because there's only one who's perfect, and that's Jesus himself. We're imperfect. He doesn't change. We're changing all the time. But how can we relate to moving targets all around us? Well, you first have to relate to the one who is a foundation, one who is solid, one who does not change, but also one who changes us, one who works in us, one who connects us all, because in him we live, move, and have our being. I mean, you cannot really have a genuine relationship with anyone else until you have a genuine relationship with the Lord. And that's the struggle, is we all, as believers, unbelievers, they're trying to figure out their way. But we as believers know, I need to have a relationship with the Lord. But then we get into church and we get into trying to look the part. We try to speak the part. We try to do what the commands say so that people think we're about those things and think we're more like Jesus, and think that, we want people to perceive us that way rather than actually being that way. And that's where we get into trouble, that we want to look loving more than actually being loving. We want to look godly more than we want to be godly. We want to have good-looking relationships rather than actually having good relationships. Good-looking or good. We often confuse them, and it's difficult, and all that really stems back to the original problem for us. We're selfish. We're all about ourselves. What can I get out of this relationship? What can I get from this person? What do I get from God? And not that those things aren't involved. I mean, true love is reciprocal. I mean, when there's a relationship, one will love another, and that person will love back. That's relationship. But when we go at it of, okay, how do I get something out of you? What do I get from you? You're immediately reversing the relationship to yourself, and it's isolation. It's devastation. Even though there's often facsimiles of relationships, there's a perversion of relationship within humanity, that interaction, joking and laughing, and none of those are bad, but those become replacements for the real relationship of genuine love, of self-sacrificial love for the good of another. And that's why in Titus chapter 3 he says, hey, once we were hated, and we hated each other, because biblically speaking, if you don't love, you hate. Even if you go, well, I don't wish anyone any harm, but if you put yourself above others, when the dice really come down, when the pedal meets the metal, whatever the euphemisms are, when it really comes down to it, you're going to choose yourself over others, which means you're a cannibal, which means you'll devour anyone else if it comes down to it. And that's where we often don't see ourselves that way, because God is gracious not to put us in those situations. But he gives us hints. He gives us trials. He gives us troubles. He gives us annoyances from other people. And people are difficult and hard to be around. They're scary, and they hurt us, and they do wicked things. And so we back away from that. That just tells us we don't really have that loving, self-sacrificial love for others. We have a very selfish interest in them. We have maybe an affection more akin to how you might like your car or your house. You don't have a full-out relationship, but there's a sentiment to it. There's, you attach memories, you attach how you felt to it. There's certain music comes on, you get a feeling. And feelings are not averse to relationship. They're part of it. But we often think that is the relationship. How I feel about this, how I feel about this person, it becomes a huge confusion. We make it confusing, whereas God has made it very simple. How do you really have a relationship with God and with others? He says, the greatest command, love the Lord your God. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself, as if they were you, because that's the most natural thing to us. We love ourselves, and that's what isolates us. But when we start to love others at the expense of our own self-love, that's when relationships actually become built. That's when we can be open-hearted. That's when we can confess and renounce sin. That's when we can actually enjoy good fellowship, because there's unity in the same pulling direction of wanting to honor God and bless each other rather than bless myself. How do you build relationships? Boy, just based on those two commands, the whole law and the prophets hang on loving God and loving others. There's no way you can go through just a few verses to say, how do you build a relationship? Because the whole of Scripture is arguably aimed at just that, building a relationship between you and God and you and others. So how do we do it? Learn to die to yourself and learn to love others more than yourself, so that you come in last, others are coming in before you, and God comes in before everyone else. Those are the kind of things that when we start to understand, apply, and live it out, practice it, you start to understand what relationship is, what a true, genuine relationship can be, and the joy of genuine heart openness with each other and with the Lord. So, hey, hope the discussions, questions, and the verses will help you to think through this. May God open our eyes to have genuine, loving relationships with Him and with each other. So, hey, love you guys as best as I can at this point, but may God continue to move in us to have greater relationships with each other and especially with Him. Love you guys. Have a good one.